The millionaire burst into laughter when the janitor's little daughter boldly declared, "I speak 9 languages." But his arrogant smile quickly faded into pure shock when she started speaking. Before we dive into the story, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. The marble floors of the Grand Meridian Hotel gleamed under the crystal chandeliers as 32-year-old Khalil al-Rashid adjusted his Patek Philippe watch. His tailored Italian suit commanded respect in every room he entered, and today was no different. The oil heir had flown in from Dubai to finalize a $50 million acquisition, and everything had to be perfect. "Mr. Al-Rashid, your penthouse suite is ready," the concierge announced with practiced deference. As Khalil strode toward the golden elevator, a small figure caught his peripheral vision. A 7-year-old girl with curly brown hair sat cross-legged on the floor near the service corridor, quietly reading a worn book. Her clothes were simple, a faded yellow dress and scuffed sneakers that had seen better days. "Excuse me, little one," Khalil said in his accented English, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "This is not a playground. Where are your parents?" The girl looked up with startling green eyes that seemed far too mature for her age. "My mama works here." "She cleans the rooms," she replied matter-of-factly, her voice clear and confident despite her youth. Khalil's eyebrows rose slightly. A worker's child, here in the luxury section of the hotel. "Well, you shouldn't be sitting on the floor like this. It's unseemly." The little girl tilted her head, studying him with curiosity rather than intimidation. "You're from the Middle East, aren't you? Your accent sounds like the businessmen from Kuwait and Saudi Arabia who stay in the executive suites." Now Khalil was genuinely surprised. Most adults couldn't distinguish between Middle Eastern accents with such precision. "You have a good ear, child. What's your name?" "Emma," she said, closing her book and standing up. "Emma Martinez. And I know you're probably thinking I'm just some poor kid who doesn't belong here, but I speak 9 languages fluently." Khalil's expression shifted to barely concealed amusement. The absurdity of this tiny girl making such a claim struck him as almost comical. Here he was, one of the most educated men in his social circle, fluent in 4 languages himself. And this child was claiming to speak 9. 9 languages, he repeated, his tone dripping with skepticism. "That's quite impressive for someone your age. I suppose you learned them at your prestigious private school?" Emma's eyes flashed with something that looked like disappointment, but not surprise. She'd heard that tone before. "I don't go to private school. I go to Jefferson Elementary, but I learn languages by listening to the hotel guests. Every day after school, I sit here and hear people from all over the world." Khalil chuckled, the sound echoing off the marble walls. "Right. And I suppose you understand everything they say?" "Most of it," Emma replied simply, seemingly unbothered by his mockery. "Like right now, you're thinking I'm just a foolish little girl who watches too much television." The businessman's smile faltered slightly. There was something unsettling about the child's direct gaze, the way she spoke without the usual deference children showed to adults, especially wealthy adults. "Tell you what, little Emma," Khalil said, deciding to indulge what he assumed was an elaborate childhood fantasy. "If you really speak 9 languages, why don't you prove it? Say something in Spanish." Emma's expression didn't change. She began speaking in what was unmistakably perfect Spanish, her words flowing naturally as she explained complex topics about literature and financial markets. Her pronunciation was flawless, not the halting textbook Spanish he'd expected, but fluid, natural speech that would challenge even educated adults. Khalil blinked in surprise, but quickly recovered. Lucky guess, anyone can memorize a few phrases. Emma sighed softly, as if she'd had this conversation many times before. Then, without warning, she began speaking in what Khalil immediately recognized as perfect classical Arabic. Her accent was flawless, her grammar impeccable. She was telling him profound things about his character, observations that cut straight to his soul. Khalil's face went completely white. This wasn't possible. She was speaking Arabic better than most native speakers he knew. But Emma wasn't finished. Without pausing, she switched to what sounded like perfect Mandarin Chinese, her tone and inflection matching that of native speakers he'd met in Beijing. She spoke about wealth and loneliness, with a wisdom that seemed impossible for her age. Then she shifted to Russian, her pronunciation crisp and accurate as she made observations about his life that were uncomfortably precise. Then flawless French, speaking with the refinement of someone educated in Paris. Each language switch hit Khalil like a physical blow. This 7-year-old child was not only speaking multiple languages with native-level fluency, but she was making profound observations about his life in each one. How could she know about the loneliness he carried, the emptiness that all his wealth couldn't fill? Khalil stood frozen in the hotel lobby, his mouth slightly open, his usual composure completely shattered. Other guests were beginning to stare at the strange scene, a richly dressed businessman looking stunned, while a small girl in a faded dress looked up at him with those penetrating green eyes. "How?" he whispered, the word barely audible. "How is this possible?" Emma picked up her book and looked at him with something that might have been pity. "People always ask how, never why. I learned because I wanted to understand. Every person who walks through these doors has a story, Mr. Al-Rashid. And stories don't have language barriers when you know how to listen." She turned to walk away, then paused and looked back over her shoulder. "Oh, and your Arabic accent. It has Dubai written all over it. Probably Al-Wazl district, if I had to guess." As Emma disappeared around the corner toward the service elevator, Khalil remained rooted to the spot, his mind reeling. In 32 years of life, surrounded by the most educated and accomplished people in the world, he had never encountered anything like this. And somehow, he knew his life had just changed forever. Khalil al-Rashid hadn't slept properly in 3 days. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw those piercing green eyes and heard that small voice speaking perfect Arabic, cutting through his defenses like a blade through silk. He'd cancelled 2 important meetings and postponed his return flight to Dubai, something that would have been unthinkable just a week ago. The penthouse suite felt like a golden cage as he paced from window to window, overlooking the bustling city below. His business associates had been calling constantly, wondering where their decisive, always-in-control leader had disappeared to. But Khalil couldn't explain what he didn't understand himself. "Sir, your breakfast is ready," his personal assistant Ahmed announced from the doorway. "I'm not hungry," Khalil replied, not turning from the window. "Ahmed, have you ever met someone who completely changed your perspective on everything you thought you knew?" Ahmed hesitated. In 5 years of working for Khalil, he'd never heard his boss ask such a personal question. "I'm not sure I follow, sir." Khalil finally turned around, and Ahmed was startled to see exhaustion etched across his employer's usually immaculate features. "There's a child in this hotel, 7 years old. She speaks more languages than most university professors, and sees right through people as if their souls were made of glass." "That sounds remarkable, sir." "Remarkable doesn't begin to cover it," Khalil muttered, running his hands through his hair. "I need you to find out everything you can about her. Her name is Emma Martinez. Her mother works as a cleaner here." Ahmed nodded, making notes on his tablet. "What exactly would you like to know?" Khalil paused, staring out at the city again. What did he want to know? Why a child's words had shattered his carefully constructed world. Why he felt more vulnerable after a 5-minute conversation with her than he had during years of high-stakes business negotiations. Everything, he said finally. Her background, her family, how she learned to speak like that. And Ahmed? Be discreet. I don't want anyone to know we're looking into this. As his assistant left, Khalil found himself drawn back to the elevators. Maybe if he went down to the lobby, he'd see Emma again. Maybe this time he'd understand what had happened to him in that marble corridor. Or maybe, if he was honest with himself, he just wanted to hear that extraordinary mind speak again. The lobby was bustling with the usual afternoon crowd, but there was no sign of a small girl with curly brown hair. Disappointed, Khalil was about to return to his suite when he noticed something that made him freeze. Near the service corridor, where he'd first encountered Emma, a worn book lay forgotten on the floor. He walked over and picked it up, surprised by its weight and the advanced nature of its content. It was a graduate-level linguistics textbook, filled with detailed notes written in a child's handwriting. The margins contained observations about phonetic patterns and grammatical structures that would challenge doctoral students. As Khalil flipped through the pages, one particular note made his heart race. Written in pencil, in that same careful, childish script, were the words, "Mr. Al-Rashid speaks Arabic like someone trying to forget where he came from. Pain changes how we hold our words." How could a 7-year-old see so clearly what he'd spent decades trying to hide? The service elevator was smaller and more utilitarian than the gold-plated passenger elevators Khalil was accustomed to, but he didn't care. He'd spent the morning tracking down Emma's schedule through discreet inquiries with hotel staff, and now he knew her mother worked the 15th floor during the afternoon shift. Maria Martinez was exactly what he'd expected, and nothing like he'd prepared for. She was probably in her early 30s, with the same striking green eyes as her daughter, but her face carried the weight of someone who'd lived through hardships that aged a person beyond their years. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and her cleaning uniform was spotless, despite the obvious wear. "Mrs. Martinez?" Khalil called softly as she emerged from one of the guest rooms, pushing a housekeeping cart. She looked up, and he saw immediate wariness in her expression. Hotel maids didn't usually have conversations with penthouse guests, and her body language suggested she knew this encounter could mean trouble. "Yes, sir? Is there something wrong with your room?" "No, nothing like that," Khalil assured her, trying to make his voice as non-threatening as possible. "I wanted to talk to you about your daughter, Emma." The wariness immediately transformed into something closer to alarm. "Emma? What about Emma? Has she been bothering the guests? I told her to stay in the designated areas." "She hasn't done anything wrong," Khalil interrupted quickly. "Quite the opposite, actually. I had a conversation with her a few days ago that was extraordinary." Maria's shoulders relaxed slightly, but her eyes remained guarded. "Extraordinary how?" Khalil found himself struggling to find the right words. How do you explain to a mother that her 7-year-old daughter had single-handedly dismantled your worldview? "She demonstrated remarkable linguistic abilities. I've never encountered anything like it." "Oh," Maria said quietly, and something shifted in her expression, pride mixed with an emotion Khalil couldn't quite identify. Fear, perhaps? "She's always been special that way. Mrs. Martinez, I hope you don't mind me asking, but how did she learn to speak so many languages? Her fluency is beyond anything I've seen from professional translators." Maria was quiet for a long moment, her hands gripping the handle of her cart. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Emma remembers everything she hears. Everything she sees. Since she was very little, it was like she had a recording device in her head. Photographic memory?" "More than that," Maria said, glancing around to make sure they weren't being overheard. "She can hear a conversation once and repeat it back perfectly days later. She picks up accents, grammar patterns, everything." It's like her brain is wired differently. Khalil felt a chill run down his spine. How many languages does she actually speak? Fluently? 9, like she told you, but she understands pieces of at least 15 others. Maria's voice carried a mixture of amazement and worry. Mr. Al-Rashid, why are you asking about my daughter? The direct question caught Khalil off guard. Why was he asking? What did he want from this family? I'm not entirely sure, he admitted, but I think Emma might be the most gifted person I've ever met, and I'd like to help her somehow. Maria's expression hardened. Help her how? We don't need charity. That's not what I meant, Khalil said quickly. I meant educational opportunities, resources. A child with her abilities deserves every chance to develop them. And what would you want in return? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Khalil opened his mouth to respond, then realized he didn't have an answer. What did he want? To understand how a 7-year-old had seen through him so completely, to somehow capture that extraordinary mind for his own purposes. Or was it something deeper, a genuine desire to help someone who might change the world? I don't know yet, he said honestly, but I'd like the chance to find out. 3 weeks had passed since Khalil's conversation with Maria, and his Dubai business associates were getting increasingly concerned about his extended stay in New York. But Khalil couldn't bring himself to leave. Every afternoon, he found excuses to be in the hotel lobby around the time Emma finished school, and their conversations had become the highlight of his day. Today, Emma was sitting in her usual spot with a different book. This time, it appeared to be advanced mathematics. She looked up as he approached, and Khalil noticed she no longer seemed surprised to see him. "Good afternoon, Mr. Al-Rashid," she said with a small smile. "How was your conference call with the Singapore office?" Khalil stopped short. "How did you know about my conference call?" "You had that tired look you get when you've been up early dealing with time zone differences. Plus, you mentioned Singapore to your assistant yesterday when I was reading nearby." Emma closed her book and looked at him with those unsettling green eyes. "You sounded frustrated about the shipping delays." The casual way she processed and retained information still amazed him. "You have an incredible memory, Emma." "It's not always a good thing," she replied matter-of-factly. "I remember everything, including things I wish I could forget." Before Khalil could ask what she meant, a commotion near the front desk caught their attention. An elderly Japanese businessman was clearly agitated, speaking rapidly in Japanese to a frustrated hotel clerk who obviously didn't understand him. "He's having a heart episode," Emma said suddenly, standing up. "Not a heart attack, but cardiac stress. He's asking for his medication and trying to explain that he needs to call his doctor in Tokyo." Khalil watched in amazement as Emma walked calmly over to the distressed man and began speaking to him in what sounded like perfect Japanese. The businessman's face immediately showed relief as Emma translated his needs to the hotel staff. Within minutes, she had coordinated getting his medication from his room and helped him place a call to his physician. "How did you know he was having a cardiac episode?" Khalil asked when Emma returned. His breathing pattern, the way he was holding his left arm, and the specific words he was using in Japanese. "My brain automatically catalogues these patterns." She sat back down as if nothing extraordinary had happened. "Dr. Yamamoto gets cardiac stress when he travels. This is the 3rd time I've helped him." Khalil shook his head in disbelief. "Emma, what you just did, most professional translators couldn't have handled that situation so smoothly." "Most people don't pay attention to the details," Emma replied, opening her math book again. "They hear words instead of listening to what people are really saying." "What do you mean?" Emma looked up at him with an expression far too wise for her years. "Like how you always ask about my abilities, but what you really want to know is why I could see that you're lonely. Or how Mrs. Chen from the restaurant speaks perfect English but pretends she doesn't, because people treat her better when they think she's just a simple immigrant. Or how the hotel manager, Mr. Peterson, is embezzling money, but everyone's too polite to mention that his lifestyle changed dramatically 3 months ago. Khalil felt like he'd been punched in the stomach. "You know about Peterson?" "I notice things," Emma said simply. "People think children are invisible, so they don't guard their words around me. I hear things. I see patterns, and I remember everything." As if summoned by their conversation, Mr. Peterson himself walked by, heading toward the administrative offices. Khalil found himself looking at the man differently, noticing details he'd previously overlooked. The expensive new watch, the designer shoes that didn't match his salary level. "Emma," Khalil said carefully, "what else do you notice that adults miss?" She was quiet for a moment, and when she looked at him again, there was something almost sad in her expression. "Are you sure you want to know, Mr. Al-Rashid? Sometimes knowing too much makes life harder, not easier." The warning in her voice made Khalil's pulse quicken, but his curiosity was stronger than his caution. "Yes," he said. "I want to know." Emma nodded slowly, as if she'd expected his answer. "Then meet me here tomorrow at the same time. There are some things I need to show you first." "Indeed." The next afternoon, Emma led Khalil to a quiet corner of the hotel's business center that was rarely used during off-peak hours. She had brought a small notebook filled with what looked like complex diagrams and charts. "Before I show you the things people don't want to see, you need to understand how my brain works," she said, settling into one of the leather chairs. "It's not just that I remember everything. It's how I organize and connect information." She opened her notebook to a page covered in intricate drawings that looked like architectural blueprints crossed with family trees. "I create what I call memory palaces for different types of information. Languages go in one palace, people and their behaviors in another, patterns and anomalies in a third." Khalil leaned forward, fascinated. "You visualize information as buildings?" "Sort of. Each language gets its own floor in my language palace. Arabic is on the 3rd floor, in a room that looks like the library in my father's old university. Spanish is on the 5th floor, decorated like the kitchen where Mrs. Rodriguez, our old neighbor, used to cook." Emma's face brightened as she described her mental architecture. "When I need to speak a language, I just walk to the right room." "That's extraordinary. And the People Palace?" Emma's expression became more serious. "That's where I store everything I notice about human behavior. Facial expressions, voice patterns, body language, the words people use when they're lying versus when they're telling the truth." She flipped to another page, showing what looked like a complex web of connections. "See, I notice that when people are hiding something, they tend to touch their face more, their pupils dilate slightly, and they use more qualifying words like probably or I think instead of definitive statements." Khalil felt increasingly unsettled. "And you apply these observations to everyone you meet?" "I can't turn it off," Emma said simply. "It's like asking someone to stop seeing colors. When Mr. Peterson walks by, I automatically notice that he's been more nervous lately, that he checks his phone obsessively, and that he's started parking his car in different spots each day. Behaviors that suggest he's worried about being watched." "You're saying he's definitely embezzling?" Emma shook her head. "I'm saying the patterns suggest deception and anxiety about discovery. The embezzling is just the most logical explanation based on the financial records I've overheard him discussing with someone on the phone." Khalil stared at her in amazement and growing concern. "Emma, this level of observation and analysis, it's not normal for a 7-year-old. It's not normal for anyone." "I know," she said quietly. "That's why my mama worries about me. That's why we move around a lot. People get uncomfortable when they realize how much I notice." "What do you mean, move around a lot?" Emma was quiet for a moment, and Khalil could see her deciding how much to reveal. We've lived in 12 different cities in the past 5 years. Mama says it's for work opportunities, but I know it's because people start asking questions about me. Questions that make her nervous. A chill ran down Khalil's spine. What kind of questions? The kind you've been asking, Emma replied, looking directly at him. About how I learned so much, about whether I'm really just a normal child, about whether someone should study me. The implications hit Khalil like a physical blow. Emma's abilities weren't just remarkable, they were potentially dangerous. In the wrong hands, a mind like hers could be exploited, studied, controlled. Emma, he said carefully, who else knows about your full abilities? She was quiet for so long that Khalil wondered if she was going to answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. My father knew before he disappeared. The notebook slipped from Emma's hands as she said the words, and Khalil saw something in her expression he'd never seen before. Vulnerability. For the first time since he'd met her, Emma looked like the 7-year-old child she actually was. Emma, what happened to your father? But she was already standing, gathering her things with shaking hands. I shouldn't have said that. I promised Mama I wouldn't talk about Papa. As she hurried toward the elevators, leaving Khalil alone with more questions than answers, he realized that Emma's story was far more complex and potentially dangerous than he'd ever imagined. Khalil couldn't sleep that night. Emma's words echoed in his mind. My father knew, before he disappeared. The fear in her voice when she'd said it suggested that her father's disappearance wasn't a simple case of abandonment or divorce. Something had happened to him, something that still frightened both Emma and her mother. The next morning, Khalil made a decision that went against every principle of privacy he'd ever held. He called Ahmed and gave him instructions that would have horrified him just a month ago. I need you to hire the best private investigator you can find. Someone discreet, with experience in sensitive family matters. I want them to look into Emma Martinez's background, specifically her father. Sir, are you certain this is wise? Investigating a child's family? I'm not investigating the child, Ahmed. I'm trying to understand what happened to her father and why it still scares them. Khalil paced his suite, unable to sit still. Something's not right about this situation, and I need to know what we're dealing with. 3 days later, Ahmed returned with a file that made Khalil's blood run cold. Sir, Emma's father was Dr. Rafael Martinez, a professor of cognitive linguistics at Columbia University. He specialized in studying exceptional language acquisition in children. Ahmed's voice was carefully neutral. According to the investigator, Dr. Martinez published several papers about photographic memory and its relationship to linguistic ability. Khalil felt his stomach drop. Published papers about what, specifically? About children who demonstrate impossible learning abilities. Children whose brains process and retain language information in ways that defy conventional understanding. Ahmed paused. Sir, there's more. Dr. Martinez disappeared 3 years ago, just after he'd submitted a research proposal to a government contractor. What kind of research proposal? Ahmed consulted his notes. The proposal was titled Military Applications of Enhanced Memory and Linguistic Processing. It suggested that individuals with photographic memory and advanced linguistic abilities could be valuable assets for intelligence gathering and international relations. Khalil sank into a chair, the implications crashing over him. He was proposing to study children like Emma for government use. It appears so, and according to the investigator, Dr. Martinez received approval for his research just days before he vanished. His car was found abandoned near the Hudson River, but his body was never recovered. The room fell silent as Khalil processed this information. Emma's father had been researching children with abilities exactly like hers, and he'd proposed using those children for military and intelligence purposes. Then he'd disappeared under suspicious circumstances. Ahmed, what does this mean for Emma and her mother? The investigator believes they've been running ever since Dr. Martinez disappeared, moving from city to city, trying to stay ahead of whoever might be interested in Emma's abilities. Khalil felt sick. All this time, he'd thought he was dealing with a remarkable child and her protective mother. Instead, he'd stumbled into something far more dangerous, a family on the run from people who might want to use a 7-year-old girl as a weapon. "Sir, there's one more thing," Ahmed said quietly. "The investigator found evidence that someone has been tracking the Martinez family. Professional surveillance, the kind used by government agencies or private contractors." Khalil's blood turned to ice. "Are you saying they're still being hunted?" "It's possible. The surveillance seems to have followed them to at least 3 different cities over the past 2 years. As Ahmed left him alone with the file, Khalil realized that his fascination with Emma had potentially put her in even greater danger. If professional trackers were following the family, then his obvious interest in Emma, his repeated visits, his questions about her abilities, might have already been noticed. He grabbed his phone and dialed hotel security. "This is Khalil al-Rashid in the penthouse suite. I need you to check something for me. Have there been any unusual individuals asking questions about hotel guests recently? Anyone who seemed out of place or overly interested in staff members?" The security manager's response made Khalil's heart race. "Funny you should ask, Mr. al-Rashid. We've had 2 men in expensive suits asking questions about our cleaning staff over the past week. They claimed to be conducting background checks for employment verification, but something seemed off about them." Khalil hung up the phone and stared out at the city skyline. Emma and her mother weren't just running from their past, they were running toward an uncertain and potentially dangerous future. And somehow, without meaning to, Khalil had become part of their story. The question was, what was he going to do about it? Khalil barely slept that night, his mind racing with the implications of what he'd learned. By dawn, he'd made a decision that would have seemed impossible just weeks ago. He was going to help Emma and her mother disappear. The morning sun cast long shadows across his penthouse suite as he placed a series of carefully planned phone calls. His first was to his personal banker in Geneva. "I need to set up an untraceable account," he said without preamble. "Something that can't be tracked back to me or my usual financial networks." His second call was to a security firm he'd used for discreet matters in Dubai. "I need a complete identity package for 2 people, a woman in her 30s and a 7-year-old girl. Passports, birth certificates, social security numbers, complete backgrounds that will pass any standard verification." By noon, Khalil had made arrangements that would allow Maria and Emma to vanish completely and start new lives anywhere in the world. The question now was convincing them to accept his help. He found Emma in her usual spot, but today something was different. She kept glancing toward the hotel entrance, and her usual calm demeanor seemed strained. "They're getting closer, aren't they?" Khalil said, settling into the chair beside her. Emma didn't look surprised by his directness. 3 men this time instead of 2. They've been asking more specific questions. One of them showed my photo to the front desk clerk. Khalil felt his heart race. "Emma, I know about your father. I know what happened to him and why you and your mother have been running." For the first time since he'd known her, Emma looked truly afraid. "You hired someone to investigate us." "I did, and I'm sorry, but now I understand the danger you're in, and I want to help." Khalil leaned forward urgently. "I can get you and your mother new identities, enough money to start over anywhere in the world, completely off the grid." Emma stared at him for a long moment. "Why would you do that for us?" The question hit him harder than he'd expected. Why was he willing to upend his entire life for a child he'd known for less than a month? "Because you changed something in me, Emma. Because you saw through all my walls and showed me who I really was underneath all the money and power, and because no child should have to live in fear of being used as a weapon." Emma's eyes filled with tears, the first time he'd seen her show such raw emotion. "Mr. Al-Rashid, you don't understand what you're offering to get involved in. The people looking for us, they're not just interested in my language abilities." "What do you mean?" Emma glanced around nervously, then leaned closer. "My father's research wasn't just about languages. He discovered that my memory works differently than he initially thought. I don't just remember everything I hear and see. I can predict patterns, anticipate behaviors, sometimes even guess what people are going to say before they say it." Khalil felt a chill run down his spine. "You're talking about precognitive abilities." "Not exactly. More like my brain processes micro-expressions, vocal patterns, and behavioral cues so quickly that I can extrapolate likely outcomes." Emma's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "The government contractors who were interested in my father's work, they weren't just thinking about translation services. They wanted to know if someone like me could predict enemy actions, anticipate terrorist attacks, maybe even influence diplomatic negotiations by knowing exactly what the other side was going to do." The full horror of the situation crashed over Khalil. Emma wasn't just a gifted child. She was potentially one of the most valuable intelligence assets in the world, and she was 7 years old. "Emma, where is your mother right now?" "Working the 10th floor. Why?" Khalil stood up quickly. "Because we need to get both of you out of here tonight. Those men aren't going to wait much longer to make their move." As if summoned by his words, Khalil noticed 3 men in dark suits entering the hotel lobby. They moved with the precise coordination of professionals, and their eyes were already scanning the area systematically. "Emma," Khalil said quietly, "don't look toward the entrance, but I think your hunters just walked in." Emma's face went pale, but her voice remained steady. "The tall one with the scar on his left hand, that's Agent Morrison. He was at our hotel in Chicago 6 months ago. The shorter one with glasses is new." Khalil marveled at her composure, even as his own heart raced. "How do you know his name?" "I overheard him on a phone call in Chicago. He was reporting to someone called Director Chen about losing our trail." Emma gathered her books calmly, but Khalil could see her hands trembling slightly. "Mr. Al-Rashid, you need to leave now. If they see you talking to me, they'll investigate you too." "I'm not leaving you," Khalil said firmly. "Is there another way out of this area?" Emma nodded toward a service corridor behind the concierge desk. "Through there, up the staff stairs to the 10th floor, where Mama is working. But they'll probably have someone covering the service exits too." Khalil pulled out his phone and sent a quick text to Ahmed. "Emergency evacuation needed. Service entrance, 10 minutes. Bring the car." As they made their way casually toward the service corridor, Khalil noticed that the 3 men had split up, each taking a different section of the lobby. Agent Morrison was heading directly toward the area where Emma usually sat. "They know your routine," Khalil observed. "They've been watching for weeks," Emma confirmed. "Agent Morrison likes to pretend he's reading newspapers, but his eye movements give him away. He's been mapping our daily patterns." They reached the service corridor just as Morrison looked in their direction. For a moment, their eyes met across the crowded lobby, and Khalil saw recognition flash across the agent's face. "Run," Emma said simply. They slipped through the service door and up the narrow staff staircase, taking the steps 2 at a time. Behind them, Khalil could hear the lobby door opening and closing, followed by rapid footsteps on the stairs. "Mama!" Emma called as they burst onto the 10th floor. "Mama! We have to go now!" Maria emerged from one of the rooms, took one look at their faces, and immediately understood. She'd clearly been preparing for this moment for years. The service elevator or the stairs? "Elevator's too risky. They could trap us," Khalil said. Is there another stairwell? Fire escape at the end of the hall, Maria said, already moving. She grabbed a small bag from her cleaning cart, apparently a go bag she kept ready at all times. As they ran toward the fire escape, Emma suddenly stopped. Wait, they'll have someone covering the ground exits. We need to go up, not down. Up? Khalil questioned. To the roof. Your helicopter, Emma said, looking at him with those piercing green eyes. You told your assistant yesterday that your pilot was standing by for a quick departure back to Dubai. Khalil stared at her in amazement. Even in a crisis, her mind was cataloging and processing information that could save them. The helicopter's at the rooftop helipad, but they won't expect us to go up, Maria interrupted, understanding her daughter's logic immediately. They changed direction, heading for the main stairwell that led to the upper floors. As they climbed, Khalil could hear voices echoing from below, urgent communications between the agents who were now clearly aware that their targets were on the move. Mr. Al-Rashid, Emma said as they reached the 20th floor. After we get away, you can't go back to your normal life. If you help us escape, they'll investigate you. They might try to use you to get to us. The weight of what he was giving up hit Khalil fully for the first time. His business empire, his social position, his carefully constructed life, all of it would be at risk. But looking at this extraordinary child and her brave mother, he realized he'd already made his choice weeks ago. Then I guess we're all starting over together, he said, continuing to climb toward the roof. Behind them, the sound of pursuit was getting closer. The rooftop helipad was windy and exposed, the city sprawling out below them in all directions. Khalil's helicopter sat waiting, its pilot already running through pre-flight checks as instructed. But as they approached the aircraft, Khalil's phone rang. Sir, this is Captain Rodriguez. His pilot's voice was tense. I've got 3 black SUVs surrounding the building, and I just received a call from someone claiming to be FBI ordering me to ground this aircraft. Khalil's heart sank. Are you going to comply? Sir, I've been flying for you for 5 years. If you need to leave, we leave, but I have to tell you, this looks like a federal operation. Emma tugged on Khalil's sleeve. Mr. Al-Rashid, there's something I need to tell you. Something I should have said before. Emma, whatever it is, it can wait until we're in the air. No, it can't. Her voice carried an urgency that made him stop and look at her. The reason they're so determined to find me isn't just because of my abilities. It's because of something I witnessed 3 years ago, the night my father disappeared. Maria's face went white. Emma, no, we agreed never to talk about that. Never. Mama, he deserves to know what he's getting involved in. Emma looked up at Khalil with those impossibly mature eyes. The night Papa disappeared, I heard him on the phone with someone. He was arguing, saying he wouldn't let them use children as assets for government operations. He said he had evidence of illegal experiments on other kids like me. Khalil felt the pieces clicking into place. Your father found out about a program that was already experimenting on gifted children. More than that, Emma continued, her voice barely audible over the helicopter's spinning rotors. I heard him tell someone that he was going to expose everything. He had names, locations, documented evidence of children who had been taken from their families. And you heard all of this? Khalil asked. Emma nodded. Every word. Perfect recall, remember? I could testify about everything Papa discovered, name everyone involved in the program. That's why they want me so badly. I'm not just a potential asset, I'm a witness to their crimes. The stairwell door behind them burst open, and Agent Morrison appeared with 2 other men, all with weapons drawn. Mr. Al-Rashid, step away from the child, Morrison called over the helicopter noise. This is a matter of national security. National security? Khalil shouted back, or covering up crimes against children? Morrison's expression didn't change. You don't understand what you're dealing with. The girl is a valuable national resource. Her abilities could save thousands of American lives. She's 7 years old. Maria screamed, stepping protectively in front of Emma. "Captain Rodriguez," Khalil said into his phone, "take off now, whether we're on board or not. Create a distraction." The helicopter began to lift off, creating a whirlwind of dust and debris that forced the agents to shield their eyes. In the confusion, Khalil grabbed Emma and Maria, pulling them toward the edge of the roof. "There!" Emma pointed to a building across the street, maybe 20 feet away. "The roof garden on the Meridian South building. If we can get there, there's a service entrance that leads to the parking garage." Khalil looked at the gap between buildings and felt his stomach drop. "That's impossible." "Not for us," Emma said with startling confidence. "Trust me." What happened next would replay in Khalil's mind for the rest of his life. Emma seemed to calculate angles, wind speed, and trajectory in seconds, then guided them to a section of the roof where a decorative ledge provided just enough additional height. With the precision of someone who had analyzed the physics perfectly, she timed their jump to coincide with the helicopter's downdraft. They landed hard on the neighboring building's roof garden, rolling among the plants and garden furniture. Khalil's shoulder screamed in pain, but they were alive and temporarily out of reach. "How did you know we could make that jump?" he gasped. Emma helped her mother to her feet, both of them surprisingly calm, considering what they'd just survived. "I've been studying this route for weeks, ever since I noticed the surveillance pattern. I always have escape plans." As sirens wailed in the distance and shouts echoed from the building they'd just escaped, Khalil realized that Emma wasn't just a gifted child on the run. She was a strategic thinker who had been preparing for exactly this moment. The question was, what had she planned for next? The service entrance of the Meridian South building led them through a maze of maintenance corridors that Emma navigated with surprising familiarity. She guided them to a parking garage 3 blocks away where, impossibly, a nondescript sedan with the keys hidden under the wheel well was waiting for them. "Emma," Khalil said as they drove through the city streets, trying to put distance between themselves and the chaos they'd left behind, "how did you know about this car?" "I've been planning escape routes from every place we've lived for the past 2 years, she replied matter-of-factly from the back seat. "Safe houses, transportation, emergency funds. Mama taught me that we always have to be ready to disappear." Maria, who was driving with hands that still trembled slightly, glanced in the rearview mirror. "Emma has a network of people who help families like us. Other parents whose children have been targeted by the program." Khalil's mind reeled. "There are others." "Dozens of families, maybe more," Maria confirmed. "Children with extraordinary abilities, whose parents discovered what the government was really planning. Some of them managed to get their kids away before it was too late." Emma leaned forward. "Mr. Al-Rashid, remember how I told you I can predict patterns? Well, I've been analyzing communication intercepts and government contractor movements for months. The program isn't just about recruiting gifted children, it's about creating them." "What do you mean, creating them?" "Genetic experimentation, selective breeding, even attempts at artificial enhancement through technology implants." Emma's voice was steady, but Khalil could hear the underlying horror. "My father found evidence that some children were being artificially enhanced against their will, turned into living weapons for intelligence operations." The car fell silent, except for the sound of traffic around them. Khalil tried to process what he was hearing. "You're telling me there's a secret government program that experiments on children?" "Not just government," Maria said quietly. "Private contractors, international organizations, even some legitimate universities that don't know what their research is really being used for." Emma pulled out a small device that looked like a modified smartphone. "This is how I've been staying ahead of them. I built it myself using components I bought online. It intercepts certain radio frequencies and can decode some of their communication patterns." As if to prove her point, the device suddenly came to life with a series of beeps and flashing lights. "They're coordinating a citywide search," Emma translated, listening to the sounds that meant nothing to Khalil. "6 teams, including local police who think they're looking for kidnapping victims. They've classified us as high-value assets requiring immediate recovery." Khalil felt sick. "How do we get out of the city without being detected?" We don't," Emma said simply. "We go underground. Literally." She directed them to an abandoned subway station on the outskirts of the city, where another impossible surprise waited. The station wasn't abandoned at all. It was bustling with activity, but not the kind you'd expect from a transportation hub. Families with children were moving through the tunnels, all of them carrying the same kind of emergency bags Maria had grabbed from her cleaning cart. Adult supervisors coordinated movements with the efficiency of a military operation, while children, who looked far too mature for their ages, assisted with logistics and communication. "Welcome to the Underground Railroad, version 2.0, a familiar voice said behind them. Khalil turned to see a man in his 50s approaching, someone whose face looked vaguely familiar from news reports and academic journals. Dr. James Patterson, former director of the National Institute of Mental Health, who had disappeared from public life 2 years earlier. "Dr. Patterson," Emma said with obvious relief. "I wasn't sure you'd gotten my message." "When Emma Martinez sends an emergency signal, we respond immediately," Patterson said, shaking Khalil's hand. "You must be the businessman who's been asking a lot of questions about our girl here." "I'm trying to help," Khalil said, still overwhelmed by the scope of what he was seeing. "Good, because we need all the help we can get." Patterson's expression was grim. "The program has been accelerating their recruitment efforts. We've lost contact with 3 families in the past month, and we have intelligence suggesting they're planning something big." Emma stepped closer to Patterson, her young face set with determination that was heartbreaking to see. "Dr. Patterson, I think I know what they're planning. Based on the communication patterns I've been monitoring and the resources they're allocating, I believe they're preparing to initiate a mass collection event." "Mass collection of what?" Khalil asked. Emma looked at him with those piercing green eyes that had started this whole journey. "Every gifted child they've identified over the past 5 years. They're not hunting us one by one anymore, Mr. Al-Rashid. They're planning to take all of us at once." The implications hit Khalil like a physical blow. This wasn't just about Emma anymore. There were potentially hundreds of children at risk, and somehow he'd become part of the only network trying to protect them. "When?" Patterson asked. Emma consulted her device again, her small fingers flying over the controls with practiced efficiency. "Based on their coordination patterns and resource deployment, I estimate we have less than 72 hours. The Underground Network's command center was a marvel of improvised technology and desperate efficiency. Former government scientists, rogue academics, and parents with extraordinary children had created a sophisticated operation designed to stay one step ahead of a program that most people didn't even know existed. Doctor. Patterson led Khalil through the operation, explaining how they'd been building their network for 3 years, ever since the first parents started discovering what was really happening to gifted children who caught government attention. "The program calls itself Project Mindbridge," Patterson explained as they walked past workstations where teenagers who looked like they should be worried about homework were instead analyzing encrypted communications. "Officially, it doesn't exist. Unofficially, it's the most ambitious human enhancement program in history." Khalil watched Emma at one of the workstations, her small fingers flying over keyboards while she coordinated with other children across the network. "How many kids are involved in this underground network?" 47 families were in direct contact with, representing 63 children with various enhanced abilities. Emma is our primary intelligence coordinator. Patterson's voice carried a mixture of pride and sadness. She shouldn't have to bear this responsibility, but her analytical abilities are beyond anything we've seen. "Dr. Patterson," Emma called from across the room, "I'm detecting unusual activity in the surveillance networks. Multiple agencies are being coordinated for simultaneous operations in 12 different cities." Patterson's face went pale. "It's starting. They're moving ahead of schedule." Khalil watched as the command center transformed into organized chaos. Parents gathered their children, former government agents coordinated escape routes, and Emma sat at the center of it all, processing information and directing resources with the calm efficiency of a seasoned military commander. "Mr. Al-Rashid," Emma said, looking up from her screens, "I need to ask you to make a choice. What I'm about to propose will put you in direct opposition to the US government and several international intelligence agencies. Tell me, the only way to stop Project Mindbridge is to expose it publicly, but we need proof that can't be discredited or suppressed." Emma's eyes held an intensity that was frightening in someone so young. "I have that proof, everything my father discovered, plus 3 years of additional evidence I've compiled. But getting it to the right people will require resources we don't have." Khalil understood immediately. "You need my money and my connections. More than that. I need you to sacrifice everything you've built to save children you've never met." Emma stood up, and despite her small stature, she commanded the room. "If we do this, there's no going back for any of us. The program will use every resource they have to destroy our credibility and eliminate the threat we pose." Khalil looked around the command center at the families who had given up everything to protect their children from a government that saw them as assets rather than human beings. He thought about Emma's father, who had paid the ultimate price for trying to do the right thing. He considered his own comfortable life, built on oil money and business connections, that suddenly seemed trivial compared to what was at stake. "What do you need me to do?" Emma smiled, the first truly childlike expression he'd seen from her in days. "I need you to call every journalist, every government oversight committee, and every international human rights organization you know. And then I need you to help me broadcast something that will change everything." "Broadcast what?" "The names, locations, and evidence of every illegal operation Project Mindbridge has conducted over the past 5 years. Every child they've taken, every family they've destroyed, every law they've broken." Emma's voice carried a determination that was both inspiring and terrifying. "I'm going to tell the world everything, Mr. Al-Rashid. And when I do, there will be nowhere left for them to hide." As if summoned by her words, alarms began sounding throughout the command center. Dr. Patterson ran to his communication station, his face grim as he processed incoming reports. "They've found us," he announced, "multiple teams converging on our location. Estimated arrival time, 15 minutes. Emma looked at Khalil with those extraordinary green eyes that had changed his life. "Mr. Al-Rashid, are you ready to help me save the world?" Khalil realized that everything in his life had been leading to this moment. All his wealth, all his connections, all his resources, they had meaning now in a way they never had before. "Yes," he said simply, "let's do it." Outside, the sound of approaching vehicles echoed through the tunnels, and Khalil knew that the next few hours would determine not just their fate, but the future of every gifted child in the world. With 12 minutes until the agents arrived, Emma sat at the command center's main terminal while Khalil worked his phone with desperate efficiency. His contacts around the world were being activated simultaneously: journalists in London, government oversight officials in Washington, human rights organizations in Geneva, and international broadcasters across 6 continents. "The satellite uplink is ready," Dr. Patterson announced. "Emma, are you sure you want to do this?" Once you go public, there's no protecting your anonymity anymore. Emma looked at her mother, who nodded with tears in her eyes, then at Khalil, who had risked everything for a child he'd known for mere weeks. Dr. Patterson, some secrets are too dangerous to keep. Bill. As the sound of vehicles grew louder in the tunnels above, Emma began to speak into the camera that would broadcast her words to news networks around the world. My name is Emma Martinez. I am 7 years old, and I am about to tell you about a secret program that has been destroying families and using children as weapons. Her voice was steady, clear, and impossibly mature for her age. Khalil watched in amazement as Emma systematically revealed everything: names, dates, locations, and evidence of Project Mindbridge's operations. She spoke in multiple languages, switching effortlessly between English, Spanish, French, and Arabic to ensure her message reached the widest possible audience. But more than her linguistic abilities, it was her moral clarity that was mesmerizing. My father, Dr. Rafael Martinez, was murdered 3 years ago because he tried to expose this program. He discovered that the government was taking children like me, children with special abilities, and turning us into tools for espionage and warfare. Emma's green eyes looked directly into the camera with an intensity that transcended her youth. They told our parents we were national assets. They told us we had a duty to serve. But we are children, not weapons. The sound of boots echoed through the tunnel system now, getting closer with each passing second. I have perfect memory, Emma continued, her words flowing with devastating precision. I remember every document my father showed me, every phone conversation I overheard, every name of every official involved in this program. I remember the children who disappeared, the families who were threatened, and the people who tried to help us. She began reciting names, dates, and classified details with the accuracy of a recording device. Government officials, private contractors, international operatives. Emma exposed them all with the calm efficiency of someone reading a grocery list. Khalil's phone was buzzing continuously with calls from news agencies around the world. The story was already being picked up globally, spreading faster than any government agency could contain it. Agent Morrison, who is probably listening to this broadcast right now, told my mother that I was a valuable national resource, Emma said, and Khalil realized she was speaking directly to her pursuers. Director Chen authorized the murder of my father because he wouldn't hand over his research on children like me. Secretary Williams signed the orders that have separated dozens of families and destroyed hundreds of lives. The boots were very close now, just around the corner from the command center. But most importantly, Emma continued, her voice growing stronger, I want everyone to know that there are people who have risked everything to protect us. Dr. James Patterson gave up his career to build a network that keeps families safe. Maria Martinez, my mother, has lived in fear for 3 years to keep me free. And Khalil al-Rashid, a businessman who had everything and gave it all up to help children he'd never met. Khalil felt tears streaming down his face as Emma spoke about him with a respect and affection that no amount of money could have bought. If anything happens to me after this broadcast, Emma concluded, looking directly into the camera with those extraordinary eyes, know that I chose to speak the truth. Know that every adult who tried to use children as weapons is a coward, and know that the bravest people in the world are the ones who protect children they don't even know. As Emma finished speaking, the first agents appeared at the entrance to the command center, but something was different. Instead of the aggressive stance Khalil had expected, they looked uncertain, their weapons lowered. Agent Morrison stepped forward, but his face showed resignation rather than determination. The transmission has been seen by 17 million people in the last 4 minutes, he said quietly. The director has ordered a full stand-down. Project Mindbridge has been officially terminated. Dr. Patterson looked at his communication screens in amazement. It's working. Government oversight committees in 3 countries are calling for immediate investigations. The president is being briefed right now. Emma stood up from the terminal, and for the first time since Khalil had known her, she looked like what she truly was, a 7-year-old child who had carried an impossible burden and finally set it down. 6 months later, Khalil sat in the garden of the small farmhouse in rural Vermont, where Emma and Maria had finally found peace. His oil empire was gone, seized by various governments as part of the investigations into Project Mindbridge, but he had never been happier. Emma was reading under an apple tree, but now her books were age-appropriate stories about adventure and friendship rather than graduate-level linguistics texts. She still spoke 9 languages fluently, and her memory remained perfect, but she was finally free to be a child. "Mr. Al-Rashid," she called out, "I've been thinking about something." Khalil smiled, settling into the grass beside her. "What's that?" "Do you remember the first day we met, when you laughed at me for saying I spoke 9 languages?" "I do. I was wrong to doubt you." Emma grinned, a genuine childlike expression that had become more common as the months passed. "You weren't wrong to doubt me. You were wrong to think that speaking languages was the most important thing about me." Khalil tilted his head, curious. "What do you mean?" The most important thing about me isn't that I can remember everything or speak to people from around the world," Emma said, her green eyes sparkling with wisdom that was no longer frightening but wonderful. "The most important thing is that I learned how to trust people who wanted to protect me rather than use me." As Maria called them in for dinner and the sun set over the Vermont hills, Khalil realized that Emma had taught him the most valuable lesson of his life. True wealth wasn't measured in bank accounts or business empires. It was measured in the courage to do what was right, even when it cost you everything. And sometimes, if you were very lucky, the most extraordinary people in the world would trust you enough to let you protect them. Emma Martinez had spoken 9 languages that first day they met, but the most important thing she had taught him was spoken in the universal language of the human heart, that love and protection were worth any sacrifice. The little girl, who had once sat on a hotel floor, hiding her gifts from a world that wanted to exploit them, was finally free to be exactly who she was meant to be. And Khalil al-Rashid, who had once measured his worth in millions, had learned that the only fortune that truly mattered was the trust of a child who could see into souls.